Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Well, Bryan Kohberger is getting his forever home. He has pled guilty to murdering 4 college students in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, and he has agreed to 4 life sentences to escape the death penalty. But now, what is in store for him? Will there be hell to pay? And I wanted to find out more about exactly what he was agreeing to, and I figured you would as well. So today, let's dive into his prison and what the conditions will be like for the rest of Bryan Kohberger's life. If you don't mind, please hit the like button and subscribe. We'd love to have you back for more videos. So let's dive into what we know. The New York Post has called this a maximum security hellhole that faces accusations of feces-smeared cages, brutally violent guards, rioting inmates, and a biohazard ventilation system. So first, I want to start with just kind of the basic question. How do we know that Bryan Kohberger is going to go to this prison? Because he hasn't actually been assigned to a prison yet. He hasn't even been sentenced. That's going to happen on July 23rd. Well, let's take a quick listen to what he pled guilty to and then talk about that question. There we go.
In sum, the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment: burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing, to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35.
All right, let's pull it out now and just talk about what we just heard. So he's going to serve 4 consecutive life sentences. That means he'll serve 1, and then if he's so lucky as to live another life, a second, and then a third, and then a fourth. They're piled on top of each other. They aren't running all together. With a life sentence, that's sort of just semantics, but it's really to make a point. He's agreed he is never going to get out of prison, ever. And then on top of that, the 10 years for the burglary charge. So he's now pled guilty to murdering 4 strangers. He'll be sentenced, as I said, on July 23rd. In theory, the judge could give him less than what he agreed to, but it's a pretty safe bet that the judge is going to give him exactly what he's agreed to. And given that crime, it's a pretty safe bet that he'll be sent to a maximum security prison. And Idaho only has 1. That's how we know exactly where he's going to go, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Special shout out to the first 5 in tonight's chat: Bama Queen, Mickey Bassett, Crystal Burns, Michelle B, and KCAM 4. So let's take a look at Idaho Maximum Security Institution in all its glory. Here is the website, and we're going to take a look at various pictures, and we're going to look at different things with it. But this is the website, and you can see right from the website that it says it's designed and intended to confine Idaho's most disruptive male residents. In other words, the worst of the worst. And Bryan Kohberger will join 548 other denizens, the finest Idaho has to offer, all in this particular prison. It's located within a double perimeter fence, reinforced with razor wire and an electronic detection system. And the population is primarily comprised of close custody and administrative segregation residents. It also, oddly, they operate the state secure mental health facility there. And then, of course, they also house death sentence inmates there. So this is the place where Bryan Kohberger has to be sent. There's not another place. And it is designed for, as I said, the worst of the worst, the people who have committed the most serious crimes in Idaho. So to me, this picture right up here makes the prison look kind of like, like a poorly designed middle school or something, but it's obviously not that. And let's take a look at where it is. It is basically, as you can see here, it's in the middle. It is in the middle of nowhere, pretty much just nowhere. The name of the town where it's located is Xana, Idaho. And you can see from, if we scroll out a little bit, and I'll show you in another slide in just a minute, it's south of Boise. And so you can see Boise up at the top there. I think you can't see my cursor, but anyway, Boise is up at the top, and the Idaho Maximum Security Institution is south of that. As I said, kind of in the middle of nowhere in a bunch of fields. And I thought you might be curious to see kind of what it looks like. This is on the ground, the entrance to it. And if you kind of scroll around, that's the view. That's what Bryan Kohberger will see when he goes outside for rec, which is not super frequent, 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. So that's what the view is like. Pretty much nada. And I'll pull it out here. Let's move down to where the prison is. There we go. I want to scroll in and let you see. That's the prison facility right there. It's a pretty big place, really. And you can see from, if I scroll out a little bit, they won't let you drop the little guy anywhere in the prison or even in that road running by it. The closest you can get is right out here. And that's that view that I took you to, where you see the view into the prison. So so it's not going to be something where I can show you all around the prison, but that's about as close as we can get. That is the prison itself with nothing around it. So what's it going to be like? Well, as I said, he's going to be housed with, Idaho's finest, and you would not expect it to be a luxury resort. I mean, obviously, but for sure it is not. The prison has come in for a pretty huge dose of criticism for inhumane conditions. Just last year, prisoners staged a protest over their living conditions. It started on February 22nd, 2024. 2 prisoners told the Idaho Statesman, a newspaper, that men housed in the prison presented a list of complaints to prison leaders, and somehow they presented this list from their cells. It wasn't really clear how that happened. And apparently prison officials weren't exactly receptive to this critique. And the prisoners say that at 3 a.m., guards raided the cells of several of the people who had complained and forced them out of their cells in the middle of the night. Prison officials said that those 6 men were leaders of gangs, and it moved them to different units. Now, the prison says these men were attempting to get the prison to segregate the housing according to gang and race, and that's why they were split up. But however the protest began, it escalated from there. According to the 2 prisoners, 27 Idaho prisoners then covered their cell windows so that officers could not see inside. I want to pull this out, and then I'm going to share a different screen with you. I want you to see kind of what I'm talking about. Sorry. Here's the picture of the cell block in this particular prison. You can see all the doors for individual inmates there, or for cells, but typically the inmates are housed individually. There's a center area, but I gather they really aren't in it very much, that they're mostly in their cells, coming out 1 hour a day for this rec time. And that not on the weekends. And you see there that small window there, that's apparently what the prisoners were covering up. And prison rules, of course, say that you can't cover up your windows. And there are a couple of reasons, maybe more, but some obvious ones are security of the officers and to make sure they know what's going on inside before they open the door. And then also to protect prisoners and to make sure that prisoners aren't doing anything illegal so that the guards can see inside the cell. So for that reason, you can't cover up your window. But they did. 27 did. And so in order to end it, correctional officers raided the prisoner cells. And they wore tactical gear and they wore gas masks. They used chemical sprays like pepper spray, like tear gas, in order to get into the cells. And prison officials say they used that spray on anyone who did not agree, and this was a quote, to comply with being restrained and escorted without force. And the prison says what that means is they used that spray on 26 of the 27 men who had covered up their windows. Let me flip back over here. All right, I'm going to remove that from the screen. I do need to say thank you to Todd. Thank you for gifting 10 Lawyerly memberships. I really appreciate that. All right. So as you can see from that picture into the cell, that was very close to about the only way the men had to protest, except. So after they used the pepper spray, the officers, the officials from the prison went into the cells and removed everything. And I mean everything. They even took the mattresses out and they stripped the men, the 27 men. According to the Idaho Statesman, here's a quote: "The men were thrown back into their empty cells without a blanket, leaving them to sleep on the cold concrete floor." And the prisoners said that there was still tear gas and chemical spray inside those units. It hadn't been ventilated or pumped out yet. So the prisoners then were upset, and they believed that these 27 men had been unfairly treated. So they decided they would respond by organizing a mass hunger strike. And that would be their protest to the prison living conditions and the way people were being treated. So on May 1st of 2024, 90 prisoners went on a hunger strike that lasted for 6 days. Now, the prison says that doesn't count as a hunger strike. And here's their argument. They say that, yes, it's true that prisoners were refusing their meals, but they still had access to commissary items in their cells. So I guess, in theory, they could have thought ahead and stockpiled those Sour Patch gummies, and that would have been good enough. That would have counted. So the prisoners said they were fed up with this long period of time in isolation, 23 hours a day. They said it was really hard to get medical care. Treatment was being very seriously delayed for them, and then that was creating problems medically for inmates. They also said the place was filthy. They said their individual cells were clean. I don't know about that, but that everything else was terrible. They said the HVAC had not been cleaned in decades. And that was especially bad because prisoners had dumped urine and feces through the ventilation holes as revenge on other prisoners. It wasn't really clear to me, how would that even be possible? I mean, how would you manage that? And how would you get over to that nearby cell to do that? It also occurred to me that it's going to be pretty much as bad for you as for that person. But in any event, that was what the complaint was, that it was just really excessively bad. So here's what the Statesman said: that vents to the HVAC system have been used by prisoners to communicate and were littered with trash, which almost sounds like they were in these areas. I don't know, or maybe they threw things to each other through. I can't figure that out. Prisoners also sometimes retaliate against neighboring prisoners by pouring urine and feces through the ventilation holes, leaving the system filthy. So maximum security prisoners are only allowed outside their cells for an hour a day, 5 days a week. And the way they do that is you may have noticed on the prison door, there's a slot in the middle. And what they do is they put their shoes through this slot on the door. And then the guard inspects the shoes and gives it back to them. And then they stick their hands through a slot in the door, and the guard cuffs their hands and then opens the door. And actually, I said that wrong because they're patted down, but they're not allowed to put on their shoes until they come out of the cell. So they're only allowed to put them on untied before they go outside for that 1 hour of time. And when they go outside, they're put in cages made of metal chain links. And prisoners say the smell is disgusting because the men don't have any bathroom outside that they have access to. And supposedly those cages are being cleaned by other prisoners who are assigned to do that. But the prisoners said, yeah, that's not really happening. They reek of urine and they have feces smeared around them. So the prisoners also said that during COVID, the prison had shut down a bunch of programs. And that was due not only to the pandemic, but also to staffing shortage. So the prisoners said the prison just never started up the programs again. They just never happened again. They claimed some religious practices were never restarted. And one of those practices was something called smudging ceremonies for Native Americans. And another was to participate in feasts that are religious oriented. So what is a smudging ceremony, you ask? And so did I, because I had never heard of that. So let's add this back to the stage. And I'm going to put up what the smudging ceremony is, according to Google's AI. It's a ritual primarily within indigenous cultures involving the burning of sacred herbs like sage, sweetgrass, cedar, or tobacco to purify and cleanse a person, place, or object of negative energy and promote spiritual well-being. The smoke is believed to carry away negativity and invite positive energy. So now you know what a smudging ceremony is. I want to say thank you to Mildred. I appreciate that. And I agree with you. Prayers that this plea will bring the survivors, the victims' families, some peace, because this has been a horrible, horrible crime and a horrible aftermath for all of them. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mildred. Misha, a new member, welcome. We are so glad to have you. And Neuropsych Xana, also gifting 10 lawyerly memberships along with Todd. Thank you so much to both of you. All right, let's keep going with our looking into this prison and what it's going to be like for Bryan Kohberger. So now, in the midst of all of this protest, the prison said, look, the prisoners are violating rules. It's not just covering windows, that we also had to take great lengths. They said we had to remove all fruit from the meals because prisoners were using it to make alcohol in their cells. And contraband was a huge problem, so much so that we had to do more cell searches than before. There were violent incidents, and that was even on the increase, which meant the prison had to restrict how much time it allowed prisoners out of their cells. So as it turns out, after the protest, the prison did make some changes, like they did clean the HVAC and they installed pull-up bars in those exercise recreational cages. The prison actually made kind of a bold move to end that strike. Prison officials sat down with some of the leaders, and a prisoner told the Idaho statesman, they took our handcuffs off and let us sit as equals. It wasn't like one was superior over the other, and we were able to sit and have a conversation. That, I have to say, that takes some guts. So, but the criticisms had their effect, and the prison has now a bit of a reputation. I read to you earlier what the New York Post said. And it called it, as I said, the maximum security hellhole, talked about some of the problems of biohazard ventilation system. It also meant that the prison made the highly undesirable list of the 15 worst prisons in the U.S. Let's go ahead and I'll add this back to the stage and show you where that is. Where is that? Just a minute. All right, here we go. Is that it? Yes, I think so. 15 worst prisons. So first, a photograph, much like what you saw earlier of the prison. And we were focused, I think, on more that part. But it talks about known for its severe conditions and strict security measures, designed to house the state's most violent and disruptive inmates. IMSI, oh, you are not reading what I am reading. Just a moment. Here. It's from the security journals. And and you should be able to see, yep, you can see the same thing I can see. Okay. So it houses the state's most violent and disruptive inmates. Solitary confinement and lockdowns are common. Inmates spend most of their time in their cells with limited opportunities for social interaction, recreation, or rehabilitation programs. It's faced criticism for harsh treatment of inmates and inadequate medical or mental health care. And the extensive use of solitary confinement, it talks about some of the effects of that. Remember, we saw a lot about that in the Delphi case that we covered when Richard Allen was exposed to a significant amount of isolation and private, where he was all alone in a cell for long periods of time. And after that confessed, and there was an argument that that was coercive. So the lack of mental health resources exacerbates these issues, leading to a cycle. So it goes deteriorating mental health, behavioral problems, and then it just keeps going in a cycle where they don't get any treatment, and then they get worse, so they get put in solitary, and it goes around and around. It also says violence is another significant concern. There have been numerous reports of inmate violence, as well as allegations of excessive force by correctional officers. Overcrowding further compounds these issues, creating a tense and volatile environment. All right, we'll pull that out. All right, so obviously that is not a list you want to make, the 15 worst prisons in the U.S., but that is something that is a list that it made. Amnesty International also talks about an earlier lawsuit that complained about living conditions specifically for prisoners on death row. Now, he won't be on death row, but you may figure that it might cut across that. I'll add this back to the stage and head over to, well, that is death row. We'll go ahead and take a look at this, and then we will, and then I'll take you to the Amnesty International article. But I thought this was interesting. They literally list all of, oh, you don't have the right, darn it. Tell you what, I will add this to the stage and find that. I have too many things open. Let's see. There's the Amnesty International one. And then we'll go to the other one. In May 1998, a lawsuit was filed concerning conditions for death row inmates in IMSI, Idaho Maximum Security Institution. The suit states that inmates are held in solitary confinement for 163 of every week's 168 hours in small concrete and steel cells with solid metal doors and a narrow slit for a window. Inmates are allowed out of their cells for a maximum of 1 hour a day, excluding weekends, for recreation, alone and handcuffed in one of 12 enclosed wire mesh pens measuring approximately 7 by 15 feet. The prisoner named in the lawsuit, Randy McKinney, states that he has lived under such a regime for 16 years and that such treatment constitutes torture. No ruling on the lawsuit had been made at the time of the writing. Now, notice that's all the way back in 1998. So I tried to find any kind of reference to that lawsuit. I tried to find that lawsuit. I found nothing. It may be that it was filed in state court and it didn't ever get to the appellate court, which is where it would be reported, and then where you would actually have a copy of the opinion. That also might have been true for the district court opinion, federal district court. But in any event, I couldn't find that. Idaho now has pretty open disclosure, but back in 1998, it may have been a different deal. It may have been much more difficult to get just state court opinions and state court rulings in any kind of electronic format. So I do want to show you, though, some of Bryan Kohberger's neighbors. Now, there is that to go for it. It's not something where the people, he will actually be on death row, but I thought you would be intrigued. Let me share a different screen. Oh, good. I thought for a moment I had removed myself. So good news, I did not. Okay. All right, let us go right here. There we go. So this is the list actually on their website of everybody on death row in Idaho. And they each get their own little blurb, I guess you call it. And they're Abdullah all the way back in 2004, first degree murder for the arson death of his wife. Thomas Creech, beating death of an inmate. That was back in 1983. And fan favorite from multiple trials that we have talked about him, his own trial where he was given the death penalty, as well as the trials, 3 of them for his wife, Lori Vallow. It is Chad Daybell, convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder for killing his own wife and killing Lori Vallow Daybell's 2 children. So he is actually on death row, and you can see that there are 5 more. There is one woman. She's housed separately, not in this exact facility, but this is the one, first-degree murder for the arson deaths of her husband, son, and daughter. So, wow. That's all I can say is wow. That, to me, that would be the scariest part of it all. Okay. So in positive news for the people on death row, again, that won't be Bryan Kohberger, right? But there is a renovation of the death row area going on. But in negative news for them, the renovation is to allow execution by firing squad. Up until now, Idaho has tried to use lethal injection, but they've had a lot of difficulty getting the medication that's used for that. So they have passed the ability to use firing squad, and that's what they're going to be doing. So it's pretty likely that Bryan Kohberger is going to be in solitary confinement. And that means he's going to be allowed to participate in religious services, quote, in a confined space, and can attend 1 behavioral interventions class. It sounded to me like right now the prison does not have one available to solitary confinement prisoners. So I'm not sure if he'll actually be able to do that. He'll be allowed non-contact visitation. But of course, his family has to make it all the way from Pennsylvania out to Idaho to see him. So he can write emails to people if he has enough money in his account. You have to buy a stamp for every page of text. 5 stamps cost $2, so roughly 40 cents for an email. You get a break if you're a regular writer, 60 stamps for just $18. It also costs if somebody writes you back. If you'd rather get a videogram, you have to pay twice as much. And an actual video, a video connect, is $4.99. Of course, everything is recorded. So if only Donna and Charlie Adelson have remembered that, right? You can send money, you can send specially approved gift packages, and you can send books, but only through approved vendors. You can't use Amazon, you can't use Barnes & Noble, you have to use one of their vendors. You also can buy an electronic tablet, but the prisoner has to have ongoing money to access it. And my guess is that after a while, there's not going to be anyone left to pay for access for Bryan Kohberger. He's quite young to be starting this process. By the way, for anyone to visit him, they have to fill out an application first. That's something they're going to have to do. So you might be wondering, well, could he escape? Is that a thing? Could he escape? Well, you saw that it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. But there was one prisoner who escaped from here when he went to a hospital. He made an escape. Skylar Mead, this was in 2024. He was serving 20 years for shooting a sheriff's sergeant during a high-speed chase back in 2017. But he was recaptured. He ultimately pled guilty, and his 20-year sentence was then upped to a fixed term of 30 years plus 5 years for other offenses. So 35 years of a fixed term for the escape that he made. So doesn't seem like it would be worth it. Highly, highly unlikely for Bryan Kohberger. And let me go ahead and thank Jackie P. Thank you for gifting 5 Lawyer League memberships. I really appreciate that. Kelly D saw me on Grizzly True Crime this weekend. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Really enjoyed being on the show and talking about the Brits Hout case, by the way. On the Brits Hout case, which I covered in person for 2 weeks, the defense and prosecution did their closing arguments today, and tomorrow the jury will be making its decision. We're going to go live in the evening to cover what that decision was and why it likely happened. All right, I'm trying to keep this video very short. I'll take a couple of questions, but we're going to make it super short. I mostly wanted to give you this information. I figured y'all would probably be as curious as I was about this prison and what it would be like, because it is, as I said, Bryan Kohberger's forever home. All right, so if you have a question, if you would put question marks at the beginning, it gives me a better shot of finding yours in the chat as it goes by. So if you would do that, I would appreciate it. Angel does have Angel points out that Bryan Kohberger has 2 sisters. That's true. And it may be that they forgive him and will send him money. I don't know. I have no idea what the connections are among that family. So I see your snark on Chad Daybell, Veronica. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Where am I from? Well, I'm from the Southeast. We'll put it that way. We'll leave it at that. But I'm looking for your question marks. I'm not seeing any. Tell you what. Thank you. Oh, if he gets paid for an interview, would the money go to the victim's family? Asked Michelle B. Great question. And if in some states, there is a Son of Sam law, it's called, after the first one of its kind, where if an inmate or convicted person gets any kind of recovery, maybe they sell a book or movie rights or agree to consult with somebody in a documentary, that money then will go to the victims of the crime. I don't know whether Idaho has a Son of Sam law like that, but it's not only probably they do, but in addition to that, there's always a possibility of a civil suit, in which case the family can get a verdict, and if there's no money there to pay it. But if he ever had money, then they would attempt to recover that verdict from the money that he made at some point. So who knows? That may be something that happens. Can the family send him money? Yes, Monica, you can. And they talk about the procedure for doing that on the website. Dolly asking what cases to cover next. I'm always looking for your ideas about what you want to cover. I definitely want to cover the Donna Adelson case. I'm very interested in the Lindsay Shiver case. If any of you even know what I'm talking about, if you're interested, let me know. And anything else, I'd be interested to hear from you what your interests are. Can he get books from the library or paper and pen to write? Asked Mama Toadstool. I would assume that they probably do have a prison library and that he'd have access to that. They may bring the books around. He also can be sent books, but only from an approved list of 5 or 6 providers, not including Amazon. So he has to be pretty careful about that. Yes, Janice, is this where Chad Nelson is housed? Back up just a little bit and you will see a photograph of none other than Chad himself on the website for the prison. Crystal, am I going to finish the Crystal Rogers case? Yes, we will go live tomorrow on the Crystal Rogers verdict. But if it's not till Wednesday, we'll go live on Wednesday, but I suspect it will be tomorrow. They'll have all day tomorrow. My best guess is that they'll have a verdict by the end of the day, and we'll talk about it at 7 p.m. Eastern. Can he be moved prisons? It's possible if they need to protect him, but it doesn't sound like there would be a ton of need. It doesn't sound like he'll have much interaction with people and would need that. But that's what it sounds like just from their website and from what I've read about it. It sounds like the bigger issue is isolation as opposed to interaction with people who might harm him. All right. Well, thank you all for being here, and I will see you all tomorrow as we cover the Brits case.